What is a decimal? Now, a decimal is part of a whole number. So, what we can compare it to is a fraction. So if I've got one pizza, I can say half. So now I've got two parts. So a decimal is a part of a whole number. What we call it is a decimal fraction. That is the full name. So just like a fraction, just like 1/3, 1/2, 1/4, we are getting a part of the entire whole. So that could be anything from an entire collection of things or an entire pie, chocolate bar, pencil. So if I have a pencil and I want a decimal fraction of that, I would have to break it into 10 equal parts. If I wanted a different number of parts, I'd have to break it into a common fraction, so into 3 equal parts for thirds. So with decimal fractions, we use the place value system extended to the right. So let's start with what our place value system looks like. We've got our ones, our decimal point, our tenths, our hundredths, and then we can keep going if we wanted to thousandths. So for example, if I had a part of a number, I would have one of these, depending on how big my part is. So tenths is bigger than hundredths, hundredths is bigger than thousandths. Because what each of these terms are saying is how much we've broken our total into. So, for example, imagine your whole number looking like this. Here is your whole. You've got one whole square. Lucky you. But you've got 10 people to share it with. Uh-oh, what are we going to do? Well, we need to break it into tenths. So I can see my tenths here. Now, I can break it into 10 equal parts. Here is 3, 4, 5, 6 tenths, 7, 8, 9 tenths, 10 tenths. Now, if I'm accurate enough, you can see that 10 tenths makes one whole. Awesome. So now we know what tenths look like. If I take 9 tenths away, I have 1 tenth remaining, and it's only one part of my whole. How would I write that? Well, if I had no wholes and I had only 1 tenth, I would write it as 0 ones, decimal point, 1 tenth. Now, if I had 2 tenths, here they are, 2 tenths, compared to my whole, we're always comparing it to a whole number, so I've got 2 tenths from my whole, I would write that as 0 and 2 tenths. Make sure I put my decimal point. But what if I had my whole? What if my whole looked like a shrunken down version? So I've got one whole, and I've got 3 tenths. Well, just like our normal place value, we need to put them in the correct positions. So I could write one whole and 3 tenths. So I've got one whole and 3 parts of the next whole. So if I kept adding to my whole, I'd eventually have 2 wholes. Now, have a think. If tenths mean I break it into 10 equal parts, what do you think hundredths mean? How many parts do you think I'm breaking my whole into if I'm talking hundredths? The trick is in the name. If you think critically about the name, you'll figure it out. You would be right. One whole, one full fresh, no cutting in parts, equals to 100 parts. You can see it's the same size. All I've done is make it into 100 individual parts. So, if I wanted to show you, I could cut a part out, and you would see it only takes up a small part of that whole. So, how would I write that? Let's say I have 1 3/10 and 3/100. So I'm going to use the same size. There we go. Shrunk it down. Cool. 1 3/100. So I've got 1 3/10 and 3/100. So that's what my number looks like. Now it's important to be able to visualize, like reading, we want to visualize what these numbers look like because it helps us compare which one's larger, which one's smaller, which are the same. So it's important for later on, especially when we're adding and subtracting. So in a minute, I'll give you some time to make your own. There'll be some links online that you can use for the internet. Otherwise you can, just like me, make a square, rule them up, and shade them in.